This is the second of our Pathways Off the Plateau webinars that we're hosting every week from now until the end of March, with service providers in our tech ecosystem here in Sheffield that provide different types of service. Some of them are private sector companies, some of them are public sector. But today we're joined by Richard Costeloe, whose Sheffield-based agency Casla specializes in helping startups and scale-ups with complex propositions. Welcome, Richard. I hope you all enjoy it. I'm going to hand over to you to share your screen and give us an insight into how you operate and what tools are available to companies now.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to have this opportunity, and thanks everyone for joining. I will share my screen. So firstly, just a really quick overview of who we are. So we're based in the workstation. I imagine it's just possible somebody on the call might also be in the building because there's obviously quite a few companies based here. As Chris said in the intro, we're 100% focused on B2B companies. Really now we're working almost exclusively with sort of startups and SMEs. But my background personally is I used to work for a much larger, sort of one of the largest dedicated B2B agencies called TMP. And I was working on some of their really big accounts. So, you know, some of the biggest companies in the world, like Verizon, for example. And I guess part of what we're doing at Casla is bringing some of those experiences to bear for smaller businesses. And I think the other thing is I sort of cut my teeth actually in their business development team. So I've got that sort of, and I think this is part of the agency as well. It's very sort of commercially oriented and focused on getting actual kind of results and making things happen in that sense. The core team is me and Millie. Millie's just sat over in the other part of our office here. And so that is just the two of us. And then we then work with a sort of basically freelance specialist to kind of expand our capability. Yeah. And then our clients, as I sort of alluded to, some experience with some really big companies, but now it's more sort of startups and SMEs. And actually, I wanted to highlight this, that there's some Sheffield Digital members. So TJ Digital Systems, Deeper Than Blue, Cherubim are all Sheffield Digital members. And we've also had some great feedback. I won't dwell on this for too long, but I'm sure it'll be in the slides. Anyway, just so that's us, just in a nutshell. So B2B focused, and particularly also, this is another thing that I just wanted to mention about us, because it's quite useful to understand, because yeah, just to sort of frame the presentation, we really specialize when we talk about complex. One of the elements of that is where your customer lifetime value is over £10,000. So that's a kind of benchmark that we'll often mention to people. And usually for us as well, it's a bit higher than that for clients. So we're best when you're selling something, basically, to put it just very frankly, kind of over 50,000 or definitely over 10,000. And anything less than that, I don't think we'd be the right agency. And also, the other thing I sort of would slightly qualify is some of the advice that we'll be giving is really centered around that kind of company, which I understand is probably the case for most of the businesses on this call. But yeah. So firstly, I think there's just at the highest level, there's two really important things to be when it comes to marketing. So the first thing is be strategic. So I'd really recommend Mark Ritson's work on marketing strategy. Some of you may be familiar with him, but there's some really good videos on YouTube. He writes really good articles about things. He also does what's called the mini marketing MBA, which I know some people in Sheffield have done, and people speak very highly of it. But basically, taking a 3-step approach, then this is kind of his framework, which is firstly diagnosis, so actually understanding what is going on, and that's not just within sort of your own business, but actually looking at, you know, the market more generally. And the idea of the diagnosis stage is that is not really specific to your company. So if you had a cloned company, the idea is the diagnosis phase would be very, very similar. The strategy is where it starts to become, so second stage of sort of things like targeting, positioning, what are we going to sell and who we're going to sell it to, that's where it starts to become unique to you. And then obviously the execution last. I think the thing that we see with startups and scale ups that is the biggest challenge, I think, is saying no. So saying what you're not going to do, defining, and I guess committing to narrowing in some way. And I think that particularly as smaller businesses or sort of scaling businesses, you're not going to be able to be all things to all people, and that's a really tough challenge, and something that we've also had to do, and it's very painful in some ways, but super important. And I think that's part of the journey that we'll go on with clients, is really working out where they're going to play to win. So, where is it that you can be the best, and where is it that you've got something that is really compelling, and then really zeroing in on that. The second thing is be balanced, and really when I say this, it's about short-term and long-term marketing and thinking about marketing. So if there's any marketing nerds, geeks on the call, they might have heard of Les Binet and Peter Field, but they published this sort of iconic in the marketing world study called The Long and the Short of It, and it's sort of the gold standard research on marketing effectiveness. And the big sort of takeaway from it is that you need to invest about 50% of your marketing into brand building and 50% into kind of what they call sales activation, but basically like demand generation. So you shouldn't be doing, for instance, solely short-term, let's try and get some revenue today type of marketing, but also you shouldn't be doing 100%, let's just kind of build the brand and sort of more kind of softer long-termist stuff. You need to have both happening at the same time, and all the data that you get, sometimes 60-40, you get sometimes 54-46, but almost always it's about 50-50. So that's the best rule of thumb. And I think, another thing on balance, which I could also, it's not related to the long and the short term thing, but it's a trap I really commonly see founders and leaders of startups and SMEs in the B2B space fall into, is kind of either doing no marketing at all or a kind of burst of marketing kind of every now and again. And so another thing would be consistent, but I guess it's like, in some sense, it's about balancing and spreading your effort consistently, rather than kind of having this kind of feast and famine approach to marketing. And then there's three, I'd say, nearly always good things to do, because basically when in our work with clients, it's incredibly unusual if you're B2B and you sell something, or your customer lifetime value is over 10 grand. It's really, really unusual that you're not going to want to do these three things, or at least maybe two of the three of them. And I think outbound and content, I think, are just absolutely essential. I don't see if you're in that kind of thing, if you're in that kind of bracket of company, sort of why those two things wouldn't be things you'd be doing. Starting off with outbound, I can dive in after I've just finished the slides on some of the ways that we automate this, and I think this is something that Chris was interested in, and also I guess some of the things we don't automate. So we think that we basically suggest having a sort of a basis of email and LinkedIn in-mail outreach, almost as like a foundational, almost like hygiene layer, that you've just got that happening. We suggest specifically, and I'm happy to sort of share details in writing in terms of and sort of more specifics on this. I think this is also going to be recorded, or sort of answer any questions, but basically we suggest perhaps one email account sending 20 emails per day, per working day, so that's 400 a month, up to a max of 3 email addresses per domain. And we don't suggest creating sort of fake domains. You might have sort of come across that in sort of the outbound marketing world, where, companies that will suggest that you create a variation or 5 variations of your domain, and then spin up lots of kind of fake inboxes and so on, and send loads at vast scale. So we suggest actually use your own domain, but be really careful and select the contacts. using Sales Navigator, LinkedIn Sales Navigator generally. Avoid just kind of what a very common scenario that we see go wrong with outbound is I'm saying kind of in quotes, we got Apollo, for instance, which is known for having quite bad accuracy data. We wanged a load of people into our CRM. We sent emails out through our CRM, so through maybe HubSpot in bulk, and we didn't get anything. And maybe we ended up with some problems like our email starting to bounce, and maybe Google blocked our email account for a week or something. Like that's a very, very common story that we hear all the time. So it's about getting the right volumes, and then also getting the right data, and really trying to let the quality of your targeting and messaging do the work rather than the sheer kind of brute force volume approach. The other thing that we recommend in terms of a channel is LinkedIn InMail. That's something you get with a Sales Navigator license. So you get 50 InMail credits per month per license. It's quite expensive for that. So it's about £85. Weirdly, also LinkedIn seem to give different people different prices, which is a bit strange, and they don't list their prices publicly, but it tends to average about that. We find that you get about, this is a hugely broad rule of thumb, so kind of it will vary, but we tend to find that you get about a 1% reply rate on email and a 4% reply rate on InMail, and you'll get a 0.5% meeting booked rate on email, and you'll get a 2% meeting book rate on InMail. So what that means is if you're sending, say, 400 emails a month, which isn't a huge amount, 20 per working day, you're likely to get about 2 meetings if you get the targeting messaging right. And if you do LinkedIn InMail and you say have 1 license and you send 50 messages, you're likely to get 1 meeting from that. But for many, that might not sound like much, but if your average customer lifetime value is quite big, and possibly you not having any meetings from outbound or kind of many meetings at all kind of with potential customers and prospects, actually to go from kind of 0 or 1 from outbound, let's say, to 3 is actually a really big increase and can actually be a really nice kind of basis on its own. I can show you, just going to check where we are on time. Okay, yeah, I'll move on to the next one, but I can show you a couple of like specific things on this next. So the other thing on the content, I mean, it's nothing radical on this, but I think it's just important to be. This is a couple of examples on screen actually of stuff we've done earlier this month with TJ Digital Systems. This is some PR efforts that we've been doing that they've been published literally kind of earlier on a few days ago. LinkedIn, posting on LinkedIn regularly is really valuable. It is both a way to get exposed to new people, but also, and this has been a really interesting thing that we've noticed, is that there's loads of people you're connected with where they will start to see what you're doing. So it's actually really valuable for those random connections that you have from 5 years ago, who suddenly see you because they see a post or somebody that they know comments on your post, and then they think of you. So last week we had a catch up with a former client, IT Naturally, that we worked on, and that came from Millie posting and somebody working there commenting and the CEO seeing it. And so it just kind of getting into that discipline of posting on LinkedIn, and also particularly from individual and company accounts, and I'd say particularly senior leaders. So if you can, if you're a CEO or founder or MD, try and post once a week, for instance, if you're not already. I think there's a big case for doing that, and you can work with a internal marketing person or an external agency to kind of make that process a lot less of a heavy lift. So sit down with somebody like Millie, for instance, or somebody in your team who and have a conversation. Think about 4 posts to do this month. Transcribe the call. Somebody writes the post, shares them with the founder. So it's not kind of like a huge amount of work for somebody like that, but it's the ROI on doing that is just because it's free to post, so it's really, really good. I think some website content is great, I think, for things like SEO and so on. And then another thing that we've seen particularly recently, it's kind of top of mind for us at the moment, is that we shared this press release with maybe, I don't know, I'm kind of looking vaguely at Millie, but I think it's like 30 or 40-ish like publications, and maybe 40. And we had, I think, about 5 that have published the article, and that is a fair amount of work to find those type of organizations and the people and share the press release with them. But at the end of the day, we've got loads of free coverage, and it's already, we searched for TJ Digital Systems on ChatGPT and Claude this morning, and already this is being cited because those AI engines, they love, things like bdaily and engineering.com in terms of, to quote from rather than the TJ Digital Systems website. And that's not the first time that we've kind of seen that sort of the AI engine optimization PR thing working well. Another really, really great strand to do is content co-creation. It's a bit of a cheat code, I think, in terms of basically find potential customers and potential partners or existing customers and partners and make stuff together with them. So we've got a series ourselves called Casla Conversations, where we speak to founders and, whether it's of sort of startups, B2B startups, whether it's existing customers or potential customers. And what it does is it's a really great way of not only creating a sort of unique piece of content, because as soon as you combine two companies together, you're creating something that's very different to sort of something that you could create using a AI chatbot, because anyone can say, right, I want an article on, manufacturing digitalization, for instance. But you can't do a conversation or a podcast, for instance, where, TJ Digital Systems, for example, had an interview with Context Software, their partner. That immediately becomes something that's kind of, it's what people actually want. Final thing on events, and sorry, I know I'm overrunning slightly, but this is the final slide. So events are really, really good. There's two main questions that you have with events. So one is, do you run your own or do you attend trade shows? I think the answer can be both are great, but I think that there are some scenarios where one can make more sense than another. So this is Sintam, one of our clients. It was actually in Dubai, and it was a couple of weeks ago, and they do something incredibly niche. They make this machine here on the left. I don't know if you can see my mouse wiggling, but that's fast EDR. It removes seized fasteners, so like stuck bolts and so on, from aircraft engines and also kind of aircraft parts, but mainly aircraft engines. And within that, are very specific types of engines, so the CFM56. So incredibly niche. There's only about maybe 100 engine maintenance shops around the world that do this. So therefore, they need to go to Dubai, they need to go to Singapore, they need to go to Florida or wherever, they're going to be going to Turkey soon. So they go all over the world because what they've got is this very geographically diverse but very niche market. Whereas, for instance, Casla, us, we have a niche, but it's not like there's only 100 around the world. It's like there's hundreds, possibly in Sheffield, of complex startups, B2B startups with complex propositions. So for us, it makes a lot of sense to run events in Sheffield because we can get a good group of people together. So basically, trade shows, I think, are particularly good if you've got that incredibly niche audience that isn't distributed, that comes together in one location, especially. Then the other thing is that in terms of doing virtual events or in person, again, that comes down slightly to whether you've got that kind of concentration of people within a certain place. So in particular, actually, virtual events plus trade shows can be a really good combo if you've got that niche thing, and then otherwise running your own in person ones if you've got kind of like a, if you're like an IT services company and you target like businesses with between 50 and 150 employees, then running with them locally is a great idea. Anyway, yeah, I think that's probably everything for now, and I'll just jump off so that there's a bit of time for questions. But I can also kind of, if anyone wants to sort of look at anything, like, for instance, we've got these, we created these Power Automate email flows that send those 20 emails a day. So that, for instance, clients don't have to be kind of logging in and sending out loads of emails, but also it it helps. It's very good for deliverability to do it in that way. It gets into quite a lot of the weeds that I didn't necessarily think it was good to go into. But I'm happy to either kind of answer questions on that now, or if anyone wants, to discuss any of this further, just drop me an email.